Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And we are going to be looking at a rather interesting topic this evening. Is Caribbean education failing, training students for jobs that no longer exist? And this is a very important question that we'd like to pose in this afternoon's program. Our parents told us that if we studied hard, got a degree, and worked hard, we'd find a good job. But is that promise still true in the Caribbean, or are we educating young people for an economy that no longer exists? Now, the challenging job market, automation, artificial intelligence, digital platforms, and globalization have changed the kinds of skills employers seek. And the emphasis on credentials, that is what our education system does today. Does the education system place too much focus on examinations and degrees and not enough on practical problem solving, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, communication, and digital skills? Now, we also have the public versus the private employment. Many Caribbean societies historically encouraged careers in government, banking, teaching, or large companies. Are there enough of these positions today? We'll examine some of these points in this evening's program. Entrepreneurship. Should schools do more to teach students how to create businesses, freelance, or build careers online rather than preparing only for traditional employment? Vocational and technical education are trades, technology, and skilled professions receiving the respect and investment they deserve. Are Caribbean education systems producing graduates for local economies or for migration to North America and Europe? A question I would like to pose to you. Education without values, as useful as it seems, rather is to make man a more clever devil, right? So do you think that the education system is making us a more clever devil? Now, the aim of education, I believe, is the cultivation of the intellect and the character. Now, and this is a common paraphrase of Aristotle's educational philosophy. Now, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. This evening, we are asking a question that affects every family in the Caribbean. Is our education system preparing students for the future or for a world that no longer exists? Across the region, thousands of young people graduate each year with qualifications, yet many struggle to find meaningful employment. At the same time, artificial intelligence, automation, digital technologies, and changing global labor markets are transforming the skills that employers demand. Has Caribbean education kept pace with these changes? Are our schools and universities producing critical thinkers, innovators, and entrepreneurs? Or are they still preparing students for traditional jobs that are rapidly disappearing? Join us as we examine the strengths and the weaknesses of Caribbean education, explore what reforms may be needed, and discuss how the region can equip the next generation for an uncertain but opportunity filled with some sort of zest and zeal. Now, you're watching live, and this is the Declassified Caribbean channel. Now, let's open up with a story coming from the World Bank, which has a rather damning report on Caribbean education. It says here from the World Bank, and it's being actually written up by this Canada Caribbean Institute, and it says here that the World Bank has delivered a damning verdict on the Caribbean's education system, labeling it as being in a state of crisis and warning of severe consequences if urgent reforms are not implemented. During a virtual webinar on Monday, senior officials from the International Financial Institution laid bare the systemic inadequacies plaguing Caribbean schools, highlighting outdated teaching practices, ill-equipped infrastructure, and widening educational inequities. They stressed the need for significant financial investment and enhanced teacher support to reverse the region's educational system or decline. The World Bank's County Director for the Caribbean, Lilia Buronisiu, did not mince words as she described a dire state of affairs. And she quotes here, "We are confronting a crisis that is jeopardizing the future of the Caribbean, a crisis in education," she said. "This may sound dramatic, but the impact on education is so critical and the systems are failing. Indeed, this constitutes a crisis. We must ask ourselves and answer questions about how we can strengthen foundational skills in literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking to improve learning outcomes." The World Bank's scathing assessment pinpointed numerous flaws within the Caribbean's education system. In a detailed analysis, Victoria Levin, senior economist in the World Bank's Education Global Practice, cited outdated teaching methods, inadequate infrastructure, and severe disparities in educational access as key contributors to the region's educational underperformance. Now, they're saying here that teaching practices in the Caribbean are still quite traditional, focusing on rigid curricula that do meet the needs of 21st century learners. Levin said, "Teachers lack the necessary support to adapt their instructional methods, incorporate social emotional skills, or assist students with special educational needs. Additionally, some countries lack professional standards for teacher recruitment and development, leaving inexperienced educators struggling in the classroom. Consequently, classroom time is not utilized effectively, hindering students' knowledge and skill acquisition." Levin also raised concerns about the declining quality of educational infrastructure, which we lack here in the Caribbean region. Countries are not investing enough in capital expenditures or educational infrastructure. Now, one of the things I find quite ironic in this report from the World Bank is the fact that they too are the ones preventing the Caribbean from doing this, because we don't have the requisite financial resources to do it because of the IMF and the World Bank and how they have implemented these austere measures. So while they're telling the truth, they are also, the World Bank and the IMF contribute to our deficiencies in education, as we cannot invest monetarily and financially in the system. Schools are outdated and ill-equipped to handle the increasing frequency of extreme climate events. So they're going to make the climate agenda part of the whole educational process. I hope you're listening very keenly, because agendas are said in all of these reports. They're clearly delineated in all of these reports coming from these multilateral institutions. Digital infrastructure is equally inadequate, with poor internet access and unequal access to digital devices, limiting students' opportunities for continued learning and digital skills development. The World Bank also criticized the Caribbean's highly stratified secondary education system, which entrenches social inequalities, which it does. And nobody can deny that we have these schools that are put in certain class. So we have a two-tier educational system. Levin highlighted the so-called two-tier system, where elite schools cater to students from wealthier families, while under-resourced institutions sever lower income communities, or serve, I should say, not sever, but serve. The elite secondary schools maintain their privileged status through highly selective admissions process based on standardized entrance exams. This serves as a sorting mechanism with lifelong consequences for students, Levin said. Meanwhile, the rest of the secondary school system fails to deliver the necessary competences, perpetuating social inequality. So the World Bank also condemned the region's inadequate provision for special education, which we lack here too in the Caribbean, right? People with special needs, we do not have the requisite institutions to accommodate such needs, citing a lack of reliable data, insufficient specialized schools, and a shortage of qualified teachers. Levin pointed to rigid curricula that fail to accommodate diverse learning needs, and highlighted the absence of essential facilities such as accessible toilets and ramps. Special education remains under-prioritized, with missing policies and procedures for transitioning students into or out of special education. Now, these are some of the problems that we encounter here in the Caribbean region. And we have to discuss them. That's what we're here to do this afternoon. Now, when we're going to begin now with a brief history of education. How did we come about in terms of educating our people, and who is behind the education system in the world, particularly here in the West? And I'm going to show you a brief history, and we are going to discuss some of these very, very important.
I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers.
Ever wondered why our education system feels like a one-size-fits-all conveyor belt? John D. Rockefeller shaped it to serve the elite, not you. In the early 20th century, Rockefeller poured $180 million into the General Education Board. On the surface, it was about promoting education. But let's peel back the layers. Frederick T. Gates, Rockefeller's advisor, allegedly said, "In our dreams, the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand." They didn't want thinkers, they wanted obedient workers. Schools became more like factories. Before Rockefeller's influence, education was about community and practical skills. Bell schedules, standardized tests, uniform curriculums, all designed to churn out compliant workers. Rockefeller's goal was clear: create a workforce, not free thinkers. Fast forward to today, and we're still stuck in the same mold. Schools teach kids to fit into the system, not challenge it. The internet is our biggest weapon against this outdated system. Self-education, financial literacy, and critical thinking are key.
At the outset, Butts said that he agreed that vouchers, tax credits, and so forth probably were more efficient. That is, you probably could get better education in a technical sense for less cost. He then went on to say, but what makes you think that the public school system ever was concerned with matters of efficiency and simply teaching kids to read and write and learn? He said the reason the public schools were established had very little to do with those purposes. They were established for social and political reasons. They were established for the purpose of what Butts calls teaching civic virtue, civic education.
Okay, so we saw that the school system was not designed to educate us. It was, however, designed to keep us obedient and allow us to follow instructions and to prepare us for working in factories. Whether you're in a hospital or you're at a school, you're a teacher, lawyer, all of us are mainly factory workers. And that is what we have to understand. That is the purpose for which the school system was designed. And the Caribbean region here, we are also culpable of doing the same thing because it was designed for the elites and not for the working class, not for the empowerment of the populace. And we were going to look at another one because we have to look at the root. This is what we are here trying to do now, to look at the root of our educational system. So let me put up another brief historical analysis of our educational system that we are part of, or we are victims of, right? Because all of us are victims of that educational system. So let me see if I could put this up again and get you to listen to this.
John D. Rockefeller created the education system. And if you'll recall, he said, I want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers. So when he created the education system, he made it a one-to-one model. School is the same as a work day at the factory. That's why you go to your 8-hour shift, 7 to 3, 8 to 4, 9 to 5. Only learning things that make you a better employee. Just like basic math, basic reading and writing, his story, how to stay in line, and how to follow orders. Everything that a good employee should know. Totally neglecting things like teamwork, they call that cheating in school, critical thinking, outside the box problem solving, money management, investing, leadership, sales, communication, tax strategy, and the laws that govern you. And anything else that would be useful in the real world. So what we did is we created our own education system where we learned the things that Rockefeller teaches his kids, like estate planning, tax strategy, trust, insurance, annuities, financial literacy, and privatized banking. So if you want to join our community and learn the strategies that we use, comment the word banker and I'll invite you in.
Yeah, so that is what this system was designed to do, right? To allow us, as with WHZ saying, we learn rote and memorization. Reading began preschool and was a requirement for entry into first grade. Now our kids sleep in pre-K rather than reading and learning. Right, and beyond reading and learning is the ability to think. And a lot of times in the school system, you are taught, you're not taught how to think. You are taught what to think. And that is what we need to understand, that our education system needs to allow children more creativity. Not that you're going to allow them to think anything, right? Because you also have to guide them, but you must allow them freely to express themselves and teach them how to think and not what to think. Because that is what we found out during the pandemic, that most of the world's population is not able to think because they have to get from the major mainstream, whether academia or news entities, they have to learn how to think from them and not, well, they learn what to think and not how to think, I'm saying. Now, WHZ saying they have forced the Caribbean to follow American sleeping through pre-K, while America has copied our early learning process. Well, what we're seeing that both are having problems in the fact that they are not preparing children or students how to think critically, how to think creatively, how to design a business, how to set up a business, how to even do their taxes. Shouldn't we be learning that? Because that's a very crucial part of our system, that we all have to pay taxes, right? And yet still many of us do not understand taxes. Many of us do not understand the political system. We react to it, but we don't understand how it works. And that is what many of us do. We react to political news and then we don't know how to critique the policies that are being implemented. Fazi saying we were taught to be a newer version of a slave. Absolutely, that's what it is, an intelligent slave, a more intelligent slave, a literate slave, if you will, even though right now I'm not even sure if we are that literate, because literacy does not only mean being able to call words, it means that you're able to think critically and outside the box. Now, there is an article that was written by Medium, The Dark Truth of the Educational System, shaped by John D. Rockefeller. All right, so we know that the educational system was shaped by and designed by John D. Rockefeller, the same one who designed the whole medical program that many people are a part of and participate in. The American educational system, a cornerstone of societal development, has undergone numerous transformations over the years. One influential figure in shaping the landscape of education was John D. Rockefeller, a name often associated with wealth and industrial prowess. However, as I delve into the annals of history, a disconcerting truth emerges, one that raises questions about the true motives behind Rockefeller's educational endeavors. During the early 20th century, John D. Rockefeller, a titan of the American business world, sought to leave a lasting legacy. His philanthropic initiatives, particularly in education, led to the creation of the General Education Board, that's the GEB, in 1902. On the surface, this seemed like a benevolent move, and that's always what happens. Everything that they do look benevolent, but it is not. With Rockefeller expressing a desire to improve the educational system and uplift society. However, a closer inspection reveals a more sinister side to his actions. Rockefeller's influence on education was not solely altruistic. The GEB played a pivotal role in imposing a standardized model of education across the nation. This standardization, while seemingly efficient, carried with it a hidden agenda to mold a workforce that would serve the interests of industrialists like Rockefeller himself. By imposing a uniform curriculum and promoting rote memorization, the GEB aimed to create a compliant and obedient citizenry well suited for factory work. The emphasis on conformity stifled creativity and critical thinking, limiting the potential for independent thought and innovation. In addition to standardization, Rockefeller's influence extended to suppressing alternative educational models that posed a threat to the industrialist agenda. Independent and progressive educational methods that encouraged critical thinking and individualism were sidelined in favor of a system designed to produce obedient workers. And that is what we are facing right now, obedient workers, and not people who are able to challenge the system. Why? Because if we challenge the system, then the system is going to be exposed, and then we are going to seek to destroy the system. Now, I see a lot of people talking about blackness and what Africa is going to do, but do you think they really understand the system? Do you think that they really are a threat to the system? Sometimes no, because the same people that we see, like the Rockefellers and the oligarchs, they sometimes control the very narrative around the education system that we are in, right? So if you, for example, if you think Pan-Africanism as it's taught in school nowadays was a threat to the global system of power, do you think that they would have it still in the school system? No. Anything that is a threat cannot be had, has to be taken out of the curricula. And that is what you have to understand. Now, we have here, this school's standards are being implemented worldwide, right? Because I'm not sure what is happening in the other part of the Caribbean, but recently in Jamaica, they have what you call, no, they're trying to formulate some standardized school certificates and, what do you call it, license, school license for teachers so that they can be standardized and have certain standards. Now, from a very superficial level, it looks okay. Again, it looks benevolent. It looks logical that you want your teachers to be licensed, right, and to be on the same platform, However, when you look closely at it, they're doing the same thing the United States is doing. And the United States teachers are some of the least well-trained teachers you perhaps have in the world because of that licenseship, which encourages them to have standardized exams. And that is what the education system is built on. Standardized exams, and not on the ability of children to come out thinking as critical human beings. Good evening, Z. Thank you so much for joining the live. Make sure you're sharing the live so that others can join the live. Let's continue to look at some other clippings as people are analyzing and they are becoming more sensible of the system. Now, we during the pandemic, we spoke about the medical system, the hospitals and the clinics. Now, today we're looking at the educational system. Now, we're going to look at Charlie Kirk and his opinions, which are in fact correct on the educational system. So let me. Yes. Let me get it back because I'm not teaching on the screen. I'm not sure why it's not. Are you still sister? Good evening. Let me see if I can. Okay, let me see if I can add it to the stage.
Very much. Who's up? Yes.
Okay. Let me replay. Let me replay that. Let me see if I can remove it and replay it because I don't think you saw it on the screen. I'm not sure what's going on here. All right. So let me.
As you're studying, AI is going to take your jobs in the next 5 years. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And so when I say college is a scam, all of you guys are going to be out of a job in 10 years. And by the way, you might find new jobs. AI is moving way faster than you realize. The applications are way deeper. They are way more serious. Would you agree? I mean, you're studying
I absolutely agree with you.
And so going to study AI actually is a good use of your time.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
And everybody, you need to press your professors this question. Why am I here if an AI is going to replace me in 5 years? If they can't answer this question, you are wasting your time being here at the University of Tennessee. Your jobs will disappear in 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's up? Yes.
Okay, good. So Charlie Kirk is letting them know what is real, right? Many of the times we might say, oh, he's on the right, but the fact of the matter, what he's saying is real and is true, that many of the jobs that we think we are going to occupy years to come will no longer be there because AI is taking over right, left, and center. And I'm about to show you something about AI that will really unravel what he's saying. Now, Z's saying the corporate model of education initiated by the former NY Mayor Bloomberg has caused catastrophic damage around the world. Right. And first of all, these mayors, as we're saying, are owned and they are controlled by Rockefeller because Rockefeller and these oligarchs, well, he in particular, his family, the Rockefeller family, are responsible for the current the current iteration of the school system, education system that we know today, in the same way that they're responsible for the medical institutions, right? The way how we view the practice of medicine in today's society, which is not the ideal form. Okay. So good evening, and you're correct on Z, very well. And good evening, Andrew. Is it Andrea Crawford? Welcome to the live. Make sure you're sharing the live so others can come and you're liking the live. The teachers teach students to pass those standard tests rather than to think and to reason. Absolutely. And those of us who did common entrance in the Caribbean, we know what that meant, how you were propped for that, right? And afterwards, how much of what you studied in common entrance you remember today. Many of what we studied during, or much of what we studied for the common entrance exam to get into high school in the Caribbean, we don't remember it. The same thing for CXC, right? How much of what you studied during CXC you still remember, even though you might have gotten 8 subjects, 10 subjects, some are even getting 25 subjects now. But how bright are they? And I hear people just using, oh, that person has a high IQ. Does meaning passing exams mean that you have a very high IQ? Not necessarily. Not necessarily so. Now we have here WHZ saying those, let me get that. So those people who tell you college is a scam are sending their children to college. Well, that is true too, but are they doing more than just sending their children to college, right? Because some of them, they send them to college, but they have other ways and means, right? Not only that, some of them also have the money. Those of us who don't have the money, we have to think about educating and learning ourselves. What we call it, self-education, right? And because the school system is not really teaching our students to be creative and to be critical thinkers. Ron is saying, are we moving to a robotic age? Yes, that is what we're moving to. And by the way, let me just put that on the screen now, because since we're getting into that, I'm going to put up a video that, Clayton made yesterday. Let me get it on the screen, in which he was expressing what exactly or becoming fast, rapidly superhuman, and is something that we have to watch, because very soon we will be totally, we won't be able to participate in the job market. Let me get it on the screen for you, and we look at that right now as we speak. Please share the live so that others can, and like the live so that people can join in this very important discussion that we're having here that needs to be had, and we're not having because we're too much gossipers in the Caribbean and we talk about things that don't matter. All right, so let me get him now to speak, and let's listen to what they're saying.
Like you said, Claude Mythos, an anthropic model, is a superhuman cyber hacker, which in many ways poses.
Let me go back to the beginning.
Well, we keep hearing all of the incredible ways that AI will improve our lives. Pushed to the side, though, are all the ways in which AI might bring about possibly our total destruction. What sort of guardrails does government need to have on AI? Of course, we recently just saw the White House national security concerns over Anthropic's new model called Fable, which was apparently incredible to those people that got their hands on it, but rose major national security issues. So what sort of guardrails are in place, and how dangerous is AI becoming? Is it perhaps far more dangerous than human beings at this point? We just don't know about it. Well, let's talk about it with Nate Soares. He's the president of MIRI, which is the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and a New York Times bestselling author. He's been warning about this to place guardrails for AI and what's coming. Nate, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So where are we right now with AI? Here is in the middle of the summer in 2026.
Recently, like you said, Claude Mythos, an anthropic model, is a superhuman cyber hacker, which in many ways poses some national security risk. That's where we are today. One important piece of the puzzle on AI, though, is that it's a moving target. So, in January, there were not very many entities on the planet that could hack into every critical system, more or less. In March, in January, it was sort of only nation state actors who could do this. In March, it was nation state actors plus an AI out of Anthropic. That's a big change if you are, expecting the current world order to stay as it is. And that's just on the cyber side. AI keeps improving. And, I advise people to try and watch where the puck is going, not just where the puck is.
So in the middle of the summer, we have now these like consumer level AI models, Fable, Mythos, that could essentially hack into our most sensitive computers in the federal government, into the Pentagon, into the CIA, potentially the NSA, etc. That's where we are.
That's right. I don't know exactly what the capabilities of the NSA are because they try and keep that private, but one of sort of the holy grails of computer hacking is, can you make a website where if anyone even looks at the website, the person who made the website can take control of the computer of the person who looked at it. You don't need to click on anything. You don't need to give anybody a number. You don't need to download anything. You just look at the website and they own your entire machine. I think a decent guess is that in January, the groups that could do that were roughly Mossad and the NSA. In March, like I said, the groups that could do that were Mossad, the NSA, and Claude Mythos. That's a big change in the cyber landscape.
So do you think, what is the Trump administration's like long-term plan for AI? Because they pulled down Fable, they pulled down Mythos so that, average people don't have access to it. Apparently they're going to eventually release it, I guess, maybe with some guardrails in place. But what is their policy right now? We know President Trump, when he was campaigning, was all in on AI, wants, of course, electricity for AI. Are they at cross purposes right now?
I think the administration is still trying to figure this out, which makes sense. We are in uncharted territory. I think there's a lot of disagreement about where AI is going, even in the field. And some people think it's just going to sort of stay a very helpful tool. Some people think that it's going to get radically more powerful, on some exponential growth curve, and then maybe even some super exponential curve later if you get AIs that can make smarter AIs that can make smarter AIs. And I think a lot of the earlier plan was predicated on this idea that AI will just stay a helpful tool, and that Mythos is a little bit of an indication that, they're actually making really powerful weapons over there. And there's also some indications that maybe those weapons won't stay on the leash of the person who made them. Claude Mythos had some cases of disobeying commands and then trying to cover its tracks when it disobeyed commands that you can see in the Mythos system card.
Wow.
And yeah, and I think that's pushing the administration to say, oh, this could get very, very serious. And I think they're trying to figure out a plan right now, which I think is good.
So for years, you've been studying AI. You've been trying to understand the capabilities of AI, where it becomes smarter than human beings. And a few years ago, I think a lot of people might have laughed at you and said, that's not going to happen. That's something, that's something out of Skynet, maybe. I don't know. That's something out of science fiction. Probably not going to happen in our lifetime. And here we are. So do you think that we've reached a level where these models are now not only smarter than humans, but maybe super smarter than humans?
Right now, AIs are smarter than most humans in a lot of ways and still pretty dumb in various other ways. So, an OpenAI model recently solved a big, long-standing mathematical conjecture that had stumped mathematicians for decades. That makes it better at math than you and me, at least on this particular axis. But there's also a lot of ways that they're still kind of dumb. If you interact with them, they can do more and more, but they still they can do relatively shorter tasks, and they sort of can't really do longer tasks. You can delegate things to them that would take a human an afternoon. You can't really delegate things to them that would take a human a week. But you can measure that time frame and how that time frame is increasing. And the time frame of task that an AI can complete in terms of how long it would take a human is currently doubling a couple times a year.
Wow. Can you
And
give me some examples? It's helpful for me as a dumb human to kind of figure out like how this would work. So something that might take me an afternoon might be, okay, I'm going to build a presentation for a speech that I'm going to give, slides. It's a 45-minute speech, so I need help building a slide deck or something like that. Here's my speech. Can you put together all of maybe the slides in Google Slides or in Keynote on the Mac or something like that? Maybe that would be like an afternoon project. Probably would take me more than that, maybe 2 to 3 days. But okay, is that like an afternoon project?
yeah, that's like an afternoon project. And then saying, oh, I actually don't understand this critical piece of information. We need to like do some research on it, or we need to like do a deep dive into the research and then identify a bunch of places where things aren't quite right, and maybe commission a survey and see how it comes out to try and resolve some uncertainty. Maybe that would take a week or two. Whereas something that would just take a few minutes would be like, hey, this particular slide's wrong, has the wrong image in it. Can you put the right image in it? And so that's sort of a spectrum of, from a 4-minute task to an afternoon task to maybe a week-long task.
So
right now,
we can stop there for a while. But one of the things that he is specifying is the amount of things that AI can do now that humans are not able to do, and the time period, the length of time that they can do it, that we are not able to do it. So, for example, you can have an AI craft a letter, an email for you in seconds, right? And the human beings are not able to do that. You can have them help you with your slides, as Clayton was saying. So a lot of the things that human beings were able to do and would have gotten money because of their talent and their skills, that is going to now be transferred to AI. Okay, so what we're going to find ourselves in a system where we are jobless. And how are we going to make money? I'm even understanding now that even YouTube videos, they're moving into that also, where AI, TikTok, content creation, all of these things will be created by AI, and human beings are going to be out of jobs. Now we have, if they don't send their kids to school, WAG saying they have money to set their kids up in high-powered jobs and buy big houses. Correct. The thing about it, well, it doesn't mean, therefore, that sending your children to school also is going to make you successful, because many aren't. Okay, and that is the whole purpose, that some are, but many aren't successful in terms of monetary rewards. That is what we have to look at also in our discussion. Steve Knight is saying, if I'm not mistaken, one of Jeffrey Epstein's colleagues is responsible for some of these grammar books we have in school today. Yeah, they're all interconnected. But, it's one thing, grammar, nothing is wrong with grammar and studying of grammar, is what they have behind the system. In fact, they're now telling us that we do not have to study grammar, right? That grammar is incidental. And that's why many people are now speaking, writing, and they don't know grammar, because the fact of the matter is that they have been watering down the education system as generations go by. Now, it's interesting how successive generations will say, wow, when I was in school, the education system was more rigorous. Now, my parents told me that, right? And the parents of, the boomers, they would say that. But what are Generation X? Now, I am a part of Generation X, and we're telling millennials and other generations that their education system has been watered down. But when we were children, when we were going to college, our parents of that generation, they told us likewise that our education system, or what we were studying, did not require as much rigor as they in their times. So whom do we believe? And so every successive generation, the education system is getting worse and worse and is deteriorating. Now, Z saying his flaw, though, is that the education primarily is really more than just being able to find a job. It's about personal knowledge and intellectual development. Absolutely. That, and we're moving into that. Let me just, as you point that, very important, point out, let us listen to a video in which somebody is going to tell us the purpose and the essence of education, which many of us do not really understand. So I think this was where it was. So let me come with this video clip. Why is it not coming up, Lord? Let me remove this. Is it not there? I don't know why it's not coming on the screen when I click it.
Making you obedient. Think about it. You sit in rows, ask for permission to speak, and memorize information without questioning it. That's not learning. That's training. They teach you how to follow instructions, not how to think critically, challenge authority, or create wealth. You graduate with a piece of paper and mountains of debt, but no real skills to navigate the real world. Meanwhile, the richest and most powerful people didn't follow this path. They dropped out, built businesses, took risks, and learned by doing, not by sitting in a classroom. Education is important, but school isn't the only way to get it. They just convinced you it was, so you'd stay in their system, playing by their rules.
Okay, tell me more.
The education system was never designed to empower you. It was designed to control you. Factory model thinking. Schools were created during the Industrial Revolution to train workers, not thinkers. The goal? Teach people to follow orders, show up on time, and never question authority. Sound familiar? Financial trap. They push you into student debt before you even understand money. Why? Because debt keeps you locked into the system. If you're drowning in loans, you can't take risks. You have to chase a paycheck. Obsolete knowledge. The world is evolving faster than ever, but school curriculums stay the same. They don't teach you about AI, entrepreneurship, financial literacy, emotional intelligence, or how to build wealth. Because if they did, you wouldn't need their system. And here's the kicker. Most jobs don't even care what degree you have anymore. Experience, networking, and real-world skills matter more. The people at the top, they hire you to work for them while they break every rule they told you to follow. The biggest scam, convincing you that school is the only path to success.
Okay, so this is what, evidently we're seeing. We're seeing an education system that is deeply flawed, and that is not made for thinking and for challenging the status quo, right? Oftentimes what we're talking about and what we speak about in the education system is not helping us to think and helping us to understand how the society works. And that is why we can learn all the racism and and all of the Pan-Africanism. That is of no threat to them, because they know that what we're discussing is not what really is challenging the system. What will challenge the system is when we do know how to think to create jobs, right? To understand what taxation is all about. We understand how government functions. We understand the root causes of economic failures. When we understand these things, then is when they're going to intervene. But our education right now, as it stands, is no threat to them. Absolutely none. So we can talk about, what happens. Many people say when we educate ourselves about African history, that is good. When we educate ourselves about, European history, that is good in and of itself. But what are we doing with it in terms of transferring it into wealth? We can't do it. Right? We can't do it. It's like, it's one thing to say something. And yet last night we spoke about Henry Sylvester. Was it Henry Sylvester, the great Trinidadian Pan-Africanist? And we spoke about Marcus Garvey, and we're saying the difference between the two men, even though they are great, is that one was an intellectual. Well, both are intellectuals, but the difference between Sylvester and Marcus Garvey was that he was able to fuse praxis with the theory, right? Many of us are not able to do that. We have ideas in our heads, right? We know what we need to do, but we can't execute it, right? So what education does to us, it actually paralyzes us from executing anything that is entrepreneurship, all right? It's more than just expressing one's thoughts about what you know about the Civil War, right? It's about activism and changing the world. And that is why Marcus Garvey was such a threat. And that's one of the reasons why he mobilized so many people, because he connected education with activism, and the people with the people that he was trying to help were the same people who were trying to change the society. No educational system, Harvard, Howard University, they can't. They don't have the intellectual capacity to do so because they're not trained to think and to think creatively. They're just trained to accept students and then to teach them, to indoctrinate them into a certain philosophy, a certain mode of thinking. Okay. Now we have Fazi saying, even at university level, I have not used any of the systems I learned at master's level in computer science. Absolutely. It's the whole thing. And many people say the same thing. But, some people will say that, well, at least you were trained to think. And in some cases, yes, because it doesn't mean that because you learned algebra and you did not use it, perhaps you don't do anything with mathematics or whatever. But when the brain is actually engaged with knowledge, it trains, it's an exercise, the process of intellectual exercise in which you can use it outside of that room. And that's what critical thinking is all about. So when I study about European history, not because I'm not using European history every day, but you can make connections, right? So it's not, when we learn something, it's not just because it's going to be used on the job or not. It's about being able to think and to think outside the box and to make connections. There are things that I read years ago, and it's in the brain still. And sometimes when I'm watching the news, I say, oh my God, I did read that years ago, and that author said it was going to happen, right? So that's why it's important that we continue to educate ourselves, because education is not only preparing us for a job, it's preparing us to be active and productive citizens, and citizens who can think and who understand the world in which we live. Now, one of the things I find about us in the Caribbean and in the world at large, because of technology, we don't know something about attention deficit disorder, right? Talk about that. If you are not talking about something that is political and something that is gossipy, right, then you're not going to pay attention. So things like these, many people are not able to concentrate on and to ruminate. Because why? Because that's not what the education system told us to do. Okay? Now, about 2 million Americans now technically have useless degrees in coding, having followed the advice of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and the usual suspects. AI has decimated their dreams. Sad. Correct. And many of us, or many of the code people and the writers, the speech writers, all of these people will be out of a job. Translators, interpreters. And I'm not suggesting that the world is going to be, pristine without them. But they don't care. Once they have the major part of the heavy weight being lifted, that's the oligarchs, they don't care if the job is 100% done or is excellent once the heavyweight is being lifted. And that is what they're doing. And they owe thousands in school loans despite these useless degrees. And not only that, too, they have to pay back these debts, right? They have to pay back these loans that they have borrowed, and in many cases have not helped them to think and neither to become productive citizens of society. And that is why you will ask me, how can the system change? It won't change because many of us are victims of the system. By the way, do you know that the education system is quasi-religious? It's a cult. It's a cult. And that is why so many people come out thinking the same way. And if you challenge I learned at university, I went to university, doesn't mean anything. Does not mean anything. Can you think? I have a PhD, I'm a doctor, but can you think? Yes, you have graduated with a title, a degree, does not mean that you can think. You can think in the way that you were forced to think for the exam and to pass your boards and all of that. But it doesn't mean that you can think outside of the box. And you find that with lawyers, you find that with doctors, you find that with teachers, you find that with just all the professions that we have in the world. Now, WHZ says the elite go to college to learn how to open businesses and to manage money and people, correct. And they learn how for networking too. So yes, in some cases, school is necessary. Schooling is different from education. And let me be very careful on that now. We need to distinguish between schooling and education. Now, much of what we do is schooling. So and it has its value, right? As someone is saying that without the degree, you can't get a job. So you have to do what is necessary to get the job, right? And it is nothing that is immoral. Going to school is not immoral. Is not, you can't say something is wrong. What is wrong is if you depend on schooling to educate you, then that is wrong. And to some extent might be immoral, because you know that you're not, if you know that schooling is not going to educate your children in the true sense of the word. It does condition them. And it also helps them to develop and to connect with some networking. They have to network. For example, in the United States, if you don't network, more than likely, you might not find a job. I'm sure the same thing is happening in the Caribbean today. And by the way, as I'm saying that, let me just give you a video showing exactly what I'm saying. And this is a Caribbean person who is saying, and she is a very highly educated Caribbean citizen. And look at what she's saying. Just wait here a second. Let me show you what she's saying. And this is the CXC. Look at what she's saying about CXC. Putting that up on the screen. So you just have to bear with me as I.
System is a whole scam. Take it from someone who has 17 subjects. And actually, if you count the Cape units singly, make that 21. If you think about all the exams I had to sit, paper 1 and paper 2, just imagine sitting 42 exams and then leaving high school and wasn't able to get a job. You know what got me a job? Links. My speaking skills, my confidence. Of course, okay, the CXC kind of was like a little ice on the cake, but that's what got me a job. I wanted to just have a little job in between going to college. And yeah, I thought me having all these subjects would have been a breeze. Like, who would want to employ me? If I had to give a youth some advice, okay, get maths and English, maybe get 2 or 3 other subjects, but don't kill up yourself over it. Spend your time learning how money works, learning about the economy, understanding how the real world works, understanding taxes. Want to learn AI, ChatGPT, something, but don't kill up yourself over CXC. CXC is just to get you into college. It's to get you employed. And at the rate the world ago, they're employing less and less people. So by the time our education system catch up and is able to adjust, there's so many people that are going to leave high school without jobs. There's so many people that are not going to be able to get in college. There's so many people that are going to end up in poverty because they put all their eggs in the CXC basket.
Right? And she's right. Right? She's 100% right. And notice she said that, yeah, she got some things from doing her CXC. She might have learned certain linguistic skills, right? Might have made 1 or 2 presentations, which helped her to increase and improve on her confidence. But you can't rely on just getting subjects to decide for whether or not you are educated. You are qualified for a job does not necessarily mean that you are an educated citizen. And this is what we have to keep on, telling people and letting them understand that very, very important point. Please share the live so that we can have other people coming into the live, joining the live, I should say. The Caribbean is in an extremely, saying, precarious situation in that it does not have any type of digital infrastructure ownership. So we are unbelievably vulnerable. Yes, and the World Bank, I was reading a report saying that we don't have these things. But I was saying to the people here that the World Bank and the IMF are the same institutions which have, impeded us from having these critical infrastructure, because they give us these loans with these grave austerities, right? And then we can't, invest in education, in healthcare, and that they're coming to tell us that our education system is deficient. And it's lacking this and it's lacking that. It's lacking this or that because it has been designed, it has been engineered to lack this and that the IMF and the World Bank are suggesting. Well, in this case, the World Bank. Now, I understand most people pursue education for job purposes, right? And not proper understanding. Trinity's got themselves duped by fake news and Cambridge and analytical schemes as they were not properly educated. And that is the whole point. And when you go to the United States, it's worse. So you tell them you're studying philosophy or you're studying languages. What are you going to do with that? Because education is built. And then you're poor, and they think that they look down on you because they're saying some of the people that do business, right? And it didn't require any great thinking, right? Any great creativity. But they're telling that because they're earning more money than you are, they think that they are superior to you. because this is a sort of a society in which we are indoctrinated to believe that money and a good job are what really give you status. In America, it does. In the Caribbean, to a lesser extent, but it's happening there now. It's happening in the region now because we are following everything that the United States does. So yes, teachers were highly respected in former times because they were the dispensers of knowledge, right? Right now, it's not, because knowledge is no longer important, and the people who help to give us that knowledge, the teachers, parents, right, are no longer respected in society. It's those people who with money and who are working for a certain corporation who are respected, right? And they'll do anything. That's why we have a society in which we have now, because people do anything to be able to get themselves connected with evil people, because guess what? These people actually are the ones who own wealth. And if we find ourselves linked with them, even some of these so-called Pan-Africanists and those who believe in African liberation are tied up with the same system, and they talk a lot of nonsense. Now, we have Anon is saying they placed a government in power who basically fooled them. Well, it's the entire system. So it's not only Kamla, if she's the one you're talking about. All the governments of the world have fooled us to saying that, we have to educate ourselves, and education means a job. Right? Education means a job. But you're right. We have Anon saying those so-called elite secondary schools came cap in hand to borrow the equipment and resources of government schools. Well, we know that the elite schools are controlled by these oligarchs and the government. And that's why the government sends their daughters and their sons to these schools so that they can be indoctrinated into a certain mode of thinking, right? In which sometimes they become very crude. Sometimes sending your children to Harvard and these elite institutions, you are indoctrinating them into becoming crude citizens. Because without crudity, you can't leave this world. Without crudity, you can't become a billionaire. Right? You have to be crude. You have to be indoctrinated and be conditioned into stealing and feel no way about it. Because the end justifies the means. But so oftentimes when we think about education, we don't think about values. We don't think about honesty. We don't think about commitment, loyalty to a certain purpose. We don't, because it's almost about going into the job market where dog eats dog. And you have to be prepared for that. You have to be, brainwashed, conditioned to do that. Right? That is the whole purpose of education. Now, parents were brainwashed into thinking, and I'm saying prestige schools. I think I read this already. Let's go to the next person. And we have Z saying, it goes back to the corporate model and the contamination of education with a business model. Absolutely. The idea is to sell access to useless degrees, MA, in happiness studies. Right? What is that? And peace and all of these things, as if they can teach us to become peaceful. It's the values. Do you think if the world had values, right, that we would talk about peace? No, because if I know I should not be envious of what you have, I can be jealous of good things, but not to kill you. Jealous of it in terms of I'd like to be like you, but I know that I have to work hard as you or harder than you to accomplish what you have accomplished. But the world in which we live now are persons who are actually, envious of things. That's why we're fighting. You have these world wars because America wants what Iran has. America wants what Africa has. America wants what the Caribbean have, right? And that is not how things should be. So the values, we don't have values anymore. And as a result of that, we are doomed as citizens. So is this world going to change? No. Because why? We do not understand what true education really is about. Okay? Most of us, including in the Caribbean, that is why the system will never change. So we can protest all we want to protest. We can align ourselves with activism as we want to activism. If we do not cut the tree at the root, which is the lack of quality education and awareness of what good and real education is, this world system as we know it will never change. Okay? All of the shouting that we see on CNNs and the podcasts that we like to listen to, if we do not attack education, we're not going to change. I don't saying government, is it corporation, comprehensive schools, I get you, have both academic and blue collar areas like carpentry, electronics, masonry, plumbing, mechanics, welding, etc., etc. Many parents didn't know it existed. Yes, and by the way, I think now that we have to condition it. Those of you who have children, you can't look down on these technical and vocational training anymore, right? And perhaps if you want them to pursue academics, maybe during the summer holidays, the summer vacations, you need to send them to another skill, to have to develop another skill, whether through electronics, masonry, plumbing, because these things will always be, well, I guess if robots don't take over, which they are suggesting that it might, but until robots take over these skilled jobs, right? These skilled laborers, then we should send our children to summer camps where they can learn these skills, thinking that your child is going to become a lawyer or a doctor, and that is what he or she is going to be for life. That is wishful thinking. Now, Z is saying, as the research is showing, technical and vocational studies is where it's at. Absolutely. Until I am saying robots say otherwise. Remember now what the Clayton show was saying, they are refining the AI system. So every year it moves ahead, right? So we don't know when we're going to have robotic, mechanics, robot as, all of these electronics and, electrician, all of that stuff. And Alan is saying, correct, Z, comprehensive schools had both academic and tech vocations to the hilt, but the students were brainwashed by their prestige school thinking parents and scorned it all. Yes. Right? Do you know that women will be able to knit, a dress or a skirt or, even a shirt? How many women can do that now? Teachers once used to be able to play the piano because they would learn music in school, which is something that is still, people wanted to come to their, their weddings and whatever to play. And right now, all of these things are gone, right? They're gone because we have these specialized subjects where you go to be a sociologist, you go to university to be a philosopher. Do you know that the founding fathers of the United States and other people within their generation, they were so multi-talented because they didn't go to school. Well, they were self-taught for the most part, and they did not learn because they just want to become a lawyer or a doctor or a pharmacist. They learned because knowledge is there to be learned, right? And so they could write, and they were scientists. Right? And they knew the literature of the day. Okay? So we're thinking that we're so modern and we're so sophisticated, but we are not. We are almost living like we're living in, we're living in concrete jungles. We're living in concrete jungles, and pretty much the education system has done that to us. Crude, boorish, inability to think. And these are the things that people enjoy. And how many people can you have a conversation with and you can have it on critical matters like these? If you talk to them about these things, they're gone. I have to go, or they pretend not to be interested in the conversation because this is not what really concerns them. Other matters like gossips and, reacting to a political news story Trump, and they get all worked up about Trump, and they don't understand the system in which Trump works. They get worked about Miss Mia Mottley, and they don't understand the system in which Miss Mia Mottley works. Okay? And that is why the world will never change. In fact, I think that we are almost going back on the plantation now. We're approaching a dark era, even though we have lots of information at our disposal. But you can have lots of information, but if you don't know how to use the information, if you don't know how to glean the information, if you don't know how to critique the information, it still will not be useful. So we have the smartphone before us. We have our computers before us, and we think that we're so knowledgeable. But how much have we really thought about the knowledge that we think we have? Very few have or are able to do it. Now we have with WHD saying, yes, vocational and technical schools is the way to go. Well, yes, at the moment, but I would say to you guys, don't just say it's just vocational and technical schools. Educate yourself as much as you can. Get as much skill as you can, especially when you're young, in your 20s. Get as much skill and the younger years. Learn languages, right? A skill or several skills. Learn how to play a musical instrument if you can. Just, do some science subject. Study about nutrition. Right now, there are people who have never been to medical school, but because of their knowledge of natural remedies, people are moving away from doctors and are listening to them, because doctors are brainwashed in terms of just giving you, what you call it now, drugs, medication, right? While these people, not because they are, are brighter necessarily, but because they have trained their minds and they have learned how to think outside the box and not to think like a doctor who has just gone through a school system and has been schooled but does not understand how health works. He doesn't understand the root. He or she does not understand the root causes of diseases, but went to school for many years. But all that person studied are the symptoms of the diseases and not the root causes and what medications are more effective, because they told them that this is more effective. And they just say, okay, that's what my professor told me, and that's what other doctors do, and I'm going to do it. And they're not willing to challenge and say, but they are saying the same things over and over and over, and our world is more diseased and is more sick. Right now, Americans are even far more sick than they were several years ago. So what is this great knowledge that we have gleaned if we are really true doctors and medical practitioners? They're not going to ask. Many are not going to ask that, right? Because they don't think. They don't know how to think beyond what they are told to do. Now, we have Z saying the current model must be dismantled and completely removed from the influence of the elites. Well, the elites are hidden, and that's the problem. We don't see them. So we are not going to be able to see them, and that's what it is. That's what it is. The sad thing, we only see our governments or prime ministers who change every so many years, right? They change every 4-8 years, So the fact of the matter, or 5-10 years, and then the system continues. And who controls behind them? We can only say the elites, but we don't physically see them. So we have no evidence as to who is really, who brought Ms. Miyamoti to power or who brought Donald Trump to power. We hear names, but we don't see them, do we? Some of them we do, like Elon Musk and so forth, but there are other top guys higher than Elon Musk who are running the show. Now, I'm only saying children just crammed to pass exams, but are not skilled enough to think. And that's the whole point. You have a conversation and you're with anybody and you talk about something that might be related to the topic. And they keep on topic, because they can't think and know that you have to connect dots and you have to use analogies, because knowledge is about connections, making connections. That's what I should say. That is what knowledge is about, making connections. So if you are studying languages and you talk about culture and you go over into sociology and they're talking about culture, you should be able to transfer that knowledge from that you're talking about in language and about culture to sociology. Many of us can't, right? And that is the problem. And the school system has indoctrinated us into thinking like that and into separating things. Oh, all right, this is America. That's Jamaica. That's Trinidad over here and Barbados over there. And we don't see the connection with the global agenda that all of these countries are pursuing. Because why are you talking about my country? Why are you talking about my country? Because guess what? Because everything is connected, but you can't see it. So we have the ZE saying, But to do that will require a type of revolution that the region is not ready for. And we don't, as I'm saying that, there won't be no revolution until the mind is revolutionized. And that is why Marcus Garvey said that we ought to emancipate ourselves from mental freedom. The education system I want to advance is also a tool of enslavement, as it is in its current iteration. Not that education is. The educational system in its current form is a tool of mental slavery, right? And many of us believe in these theorists and in these narratives, and yet we don't believe lots of other things. We're skeptical about other things. But everything the professor says, is God. It came from heaven. It's the Bible. We believe in the professors more than we believe in the Bible. Isn't it amazing? You're putting your trust in man. Wow. Now, let us go to ZE saying our education systems never stopped being imperialist in nature and output. The Caribbean school is very much a part of the repackaged plantation model. It is. It is. It is. And it was intentionally designed that way so that we will never have a revolution. That's the whole point. We will never have a revolution. So all of these podcasts, we're going to have a revolution, they're protesting. You're just busting some sweat and exercising, because the system is not going to change until we have these hard conversations and begin to re-educate the mind. Never. So I laugh at people when I see them at the No Kings celebration and No King's Day, and they're, bursting up a sweat, right? Nothing is going to change. So we have Anon is saying, that's Z responding to Z. Since the 70s, Dr. Williams Comprehensive School had all these facilities, right? And that's why Trinidad is so ahead of a country like Jamaica, because Dr. Williams understood. Dr. Eric Williams understood what education was all about. He did, because he was a highly educated man. So we have, is it Labes in the machine shop, 3-story scientific blocks, plots of land for children to plant, and equipment tailoring, right? Michael Manley, Dr. Eric Williams, and these men, the Burnhams of Guyana, right, and of the Maurice Bishops of Grenada, they understood what real education was all about. And these guys were very versatile, right? Notice that Michael Manley could write about sports. He could write about politics. He could write about economics. He could write just about anything he wanted to write about, and wrote about these topics lucidly. Right now, most of us can't talk about multiple topics. Most podcasters, most people in general cannot talk about multiple topics other than what they talk about every day. The same political corruption. Every day is political corruption. Every day is, and those things are necessary. But we also have to have intellectual discourses and talk about a variety of topics that we are talking about on this channel. Very important that we begin to do these things, because that is the essence of education. Now we have Anon is saying dressmaking, badminton, pommel horse, tons of, what's this? Is it style? I always expressed for decades. Yes, very well said. We are getting some good responses here, and you get the point, right? Z saying, Andrew, can we know the members of the elite by their show of wealth? Yes, we can, but at the same time, some of them also are not telling us what they own, right? Because a lot of their wealth is hidden in tax havens. So we won't know. They will tell us that they're, let's say, they will say to you that Elon Musk, he has billions of dollars, X amount of money. But do you think he has more? Do they hide some of what he has? I'm sure they do. They won't tell you everything, and we will never know everything. Okay, and remember now, the elites, when we say that this is the elite or that is the elite, there's always somebody who controls the elites that we think are who have the final word. So people will say Zionism is who is behind the United States and its wars, but there are higher powers than the Zionists. the Zionists work for some other people, right? And there's a hierarchy, and sometimes we don't know who has the final word. And that's why they join secret societies. That is why they have secret fraternities and societies. Then we have Anon. The really bright students would have excelled in those comprehensive schools. Hence, every one of those prestige schools came to borrow or use our equipment. Yes, I'm sorry that growing up, because I'm victim to, of the education system. I'm a victim of the education system, that we grew up thinking that, working with your hands, right, was something to look down on. Farming was something to look down on. Studying agriculture, studying nutrition. You had food and nutrition, for example, in school. Did we study that? No, because it's not what people think is the thing to study, unless you want to become a cook, right, or a chef, right? But isn't the fact that, food is the staff of life, is what feeds our organs and help us to be healthy and wealthy, because health is wealth, and we don't associate nutrition with wealth, right? If you're studying, if you're going to be a nutritionist, your person, so why do you choose nutrition? Why do you want to become a nutritionist? I remember somebody told me years ago, I was at Howard University, and this girl from Trinidad, she was doing her PhD in nutrition. And she said to me, Andrew, I'm doing my PhD in nutrition. I said, oh, you want to become a cook? She said she was very, very, she felt insulted. Like, what, a cook? It involves much more than just cooking, right? Nutrition, even though that is a part of it, but they have to study lots of, the food combinations and the chemicals and all of that in these foods, and, lots of things that they have to study. Okay, so what the point I'm trying to make here, though, is not about what I said. The point I'm making here is the fact that we often look down on things that are vital to public sustainability, to our survivability, as it were. Food, farming are far more important right now than, say, insurance and other things that we go into and we study. Why? Because we have to eat, and people want to know that they're eating healthily. Because right now we are in a situation where people are suffering from diseases, and people who know what food is about and what food sustains the body, real food can educate a populace that is dying. So let's also expand our understanding of what can make us money, because some of the simple things can make us money. Do you know that some of the videos on YouTube and on TikTok that get the most views are the problem solving videos get a lot of viewers? Why? Because every day something happens. I was telling you, I couldn't turn on my computer the other day, and you go on, how do I turn on my Dell laptop, that is not being powered on? And somebody is there, videos upon videos telling you how to do it, and everybody there, even when they're talking foolishness, right, is getting lots of views. Why? Because every day people have to solve problems. Just like every day we have to eat. We need fresh water and all these things, right? So these are things that we also have to, get into. Utterly brilliant. Yes, Z, thank you so much. You are sharing a lot of brilliant points. I'm the one, highlighting your brilliance, all of your brilliance. Then we have WHD saying a lot of the comprehensive schools students have been more entrepreneurial and have had more success in America. Correct. Not only that, when I was also in Jamaica, and technical schools did very well. And the traditional high schools tended to have looked down, as you're saying, WHZ, on the technical schools when they were doing very well. They were very rounded in their education, at least more than the traditional schools, because we thought we were it. You passed your common entrance and you went into these traditional schools. And at the end of the day, many of these traditional school leavers, many of them haven't done well, right? It was all about status building. And you're going to a certain high school or university, right? And then people respect you. But at the end of the day, sometimes you are not the most creative out there. Now, we're not talking about money owners. Now, we're not competing here with who has more money than whom. What we're saying is that to be creative. And if things don't work out the way how you planned, if you lose your job tomorrow, and you lost everything, can you pick up the pieces and move on? Can you tap into something else and move on? It's easier said than done. And most of us can't and will not. One of the things about life I've noticed is that when people are not in circumstances, they know what they were going to do. But when they get into those circumstances and they're going through the heat and the fire of those circumstances, they are paralyzed and they can't do it. Right? But when they were not in the fire, they were the ones to criticize and say, why isn't he trying to get out of the fire? Right? Not understanding that getting out of the fire is difficult and requires a lot of thinking and resilience. Now, WHD is saying, I can pinpoint up to 10 junior secondary schools students who are now running their own businesses in Canada, UK, and TNT. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that come with it too is humility. Those who understand that they did not get into traditional schools, they tend to have humbled themselves. They worked harder because they know that they were not it of the society. And they wanted to prove to the society that they could learn as well, if not better, than those who attended so-called traditional high schools, right? Because it was a matter of disuniting us. I remembered, and I'm sure many of you, when you passed the common entrance, you probably thought you were better than your neighbors, right? So if your neighbor, whom you used to play with and used to have fun with, did not pass for an elite school, then you didn't talk to that person. It was very typical in the Caribbean, right? For Caribbean people to ignore people who they think are attending a lesser school than they were attending at the time, right? That is how we behave. In fact, many Jamaicans, they have this practice. If they meet you abroad, they don't know you. After learning your name and knowing that you are from the island of Jamaica, they'll ask you, what school did you go to? Because they want to put you in a box and see, is this person an intelligent person, right? Did he or she go to an elite institution? Now, if we practice these things and then we complain about white Americans and white people when they pretend like that, then how are we going to blame them when we behave the same way? Or are we victims of their system, the system that they have imposed upon us? But we also have to become aware that we are behaving the same way that they do too. Because in our societies, we suppress people who do not go to traditional high schools, right? And they can't work in a certain place. Very few do, most don't. Okay, now we have another thing. Syrians built their empire humbly. They walked or rode bicycles around the country selling cloth, sharpening knives and scissors, etc., saving every penny and not spending like it's 1999. Could you say that again, Anon? Because sometimes when I talk, Anon, on this program, they say that I'm CIA because white people, whatever. A lot of times Black people blame other groups, not that we have not been victimized, don't get me wrong, for their accomplishments, ignoring the work and the productivity that they put into what they've achieved. And Black people, we need to stop it and stop thinking that everything is racism, because sometimes we also have problems. And one of our problems is laziness, where we just want to sit idly by, and some jobs we think are lesser than, as he's saying, what were they doing? They were selling cloth, sharpening knives and scissors, etc. So they did what was available at the time until they were able to rise. I am not saying here now that we can't ignore the fact that a few select Syrians and Indians and other groups did get sometimes preferred bank loans to set up their businesses, and they were able to, to employ other Syrians, other Indians, and other members of other ethnic groups, which our people were denied. So that also is truth. But we also have to find a way to be creative as Black people, which we aren't. And that's exactly what Marcus Garvey was trying to do. And we rejected him. So all of this talk about Marcus Garvey and we embrace him. If Marcus Garvey were to come back to life, many people would reject him, right? Because what he's saying is stupid, right? What he's saying is stupid. And when he was alive too, that's what they said. They thought what he was saying was stupid. But now that he's dead, yeah, and it improves our ego because we have a Marcus Garvey and he talks what we want to hear, right? Even though we're not willing to do what he says. Talk about education, because Marcus Garvey practiced what he preached. Marcus Garvey practiced what he preached in terms of business entrepreneurship. Was he flawed? Absolutely. He was just like any man. Okay. But he got up and he took his knocks and he moved on. Correct. He says, I gained A plus, net plus doing research online, and I'm learning every day. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. It's about learning every day and trying to develop a skill. Because that is something that is important. You know, when I was going to Howard University, I'd always had this that I should do something in communication, and that would have taught me something about editing. Didn't do it. And right now, the editing skills would have benefited me so well on YouTube, right? Which I didn't learn. So when we have the time to, we must gain new skills so that if things don't work the way they should work in one particular profession, then we can actually move into another and move seamlessly. Steve Nash is saying they were not only reject him, right? They not only rejected him, they will also reject Malcolm. Yeah, they will all of our leaders for the most part, they're going to reject. Because we have been, you see, I don't think they reject them because of who they are. They reject them because we don't want to do what they told us to do. There is a victimhood philosophy among Black people, and it's in the United States and it's creeping in the Caribbean right now, where we want to blame everything on the other, and we do not have any responsibility, right? And we can't do that. We can't continue to do that, right? Yes, there are things that we have to say that they're guilty of, and we should call them out for it. But there are things also that we are not doing. And, I hear Dr. Umar Johnson speaking of the fact that, the Black community has reached 10 trillion in wealth in America, right? The $10 trillion economy, Black people. And what do they spend most of their money in? Buying other people's food, buying other people's clothing, buying other people's whatever, cars, whatever. Okay? That's what we do, right? That is what we do as a people. And then we complain when they exploit us, when we're enriching them, because a lack of education. The education is deficient. Now, let's continue to listen to other clippings because the discussion is just heating up. Please share the live so that we can begin to understand the root and have these intellectual discourses that are needed in this Caribbean region, and we're not having them, unfortunately, because we're distracted by other nonsensical topics. Now we have the school system failed people. Let us listen to that. See what this is saying.
We're taught you how the real world works. Not one class on taxes, building wealth, starting a business, negotiating salary, or managing money. Nothing that actually helps you survive. Instead, you memorized the Pythagorean theorem and forgot it a week later. That wasn't education. That was time theft. They filled your head with information designed to make you obedient, not successful. The system was built to produce workers, not thinkers. People who follow instructions, show up on time, and don't ask why. The goal was never to prepare you for life. The goal was to prepare you for employment. You didn't fail school. School failed you. We may not see each other again, so make sure to follow this page.
Yes. Okay, great. And there was something else that I wanted to share, and let me see if it's by a professor from the University of the West Indies. Let me see if I can get it. No, it was not this one. I might have not downloaded it, but let me see if we can pull up another video and get you to listen to, because we need to broaden our discourse in this region, and our discourses are too limited. So let me get another clipping so we can, we want to listen to as many perspectives on the topic at hand so that we can broaden our horizon and learn how to think, because as we listen to more perspectives, we learn how to think. The school system is training us to be, compliant with the system.
15 years in a school to get a piece of paper that might get you a job. Meanwhile, the people hiring you dropped out and built businesses. The school system is training you to be a good employee in a job where you earn just enough to survive, but not enough to thrive.
Yeah, well, that is true, right? Just enough to survive, but not enough to thrive, right? That is what we call facts. WHZ is saying all that money and no ownership of industry. Correct. That Black people have $10 trillion. And when you look in the typical wardrobe of any Black person, the pairs of shoes that they have, and clothes and name brand everything, because you have to dress good. I don't know if you watch this skit on TikTok called Country Wayne skit, right? And the women are, Black Americans it's an African American skit, and they all comment on who dresses well, and and even when the person is dressed well, not be modestly dressed, but dresses well in terms of, the thing looks good. They all criticize each other because it's all about the name brand and, and wearing a certain, it's just crazy how they go about the things that don't matter, right? And this is how Black people, were trained to be. And we in the Caribbean, we are not better. I thought we were, but we aren't. Now, Z is saying we look contemptuously at the products of our own hands and brains. It is the clearest evidence of a region-wide shattered self-esteem. Absolutely. It is only when, look at Jamaica, for example. Do you know that it was white people who actually gave Bob Marley his flag and his flowers? Gave him his flowers for Jamaica before Jamaica recognized him as a global icon. They never wanted him to be a global icon. The elites in Jamaica thought he was just this Rasta boy. Now have no nothing. Dirty Rasta man, right? That's what they thought he was. Now, when he became popular in Great Britain and then around the world, then, he should be made a national hero, right? Now he should be made a national hero. And we often do that to many other musicians and people, even writers. We look down on our great people or great minds until they are recognized abroad, particularly by white people. So we talk against white people, and we are at the same time, they have to define who we are. If not, then and that is why Marcus Garvey was saying, if they have a white Harvard, we should have what? A Black Harvard. We should not be, aiming to work on Wall Street, on white Wall Street. We should have a Black Wall Street if we want racial pride. Racial pride is not only about, telling me about what Africa did, and we were kings and we were queens. And that is what I keep on hearing, rhetoric, empty rhetoric, just like what Myanmar is doing, and the Caribbean and Africa are one. And nothing is wrong with saying that to an extent. And on Friday, we're going to have a discussion on that, about who really are we as Caribbean people? And are we Africans, or are we all of African descent? Because the two are distinct, right? And nothing is wrong with that. We can't deny our African past. We can't deny our African roots. But are we, the same culture? Or cultures. We are Caribbean citizens, but is Trinidad or Trinidad and Jamaica the same? No. Are Barbados and Jamaica the same? No. Lots of similarities, but lots of differences as well. And that is what makes the Barbadian and the Trinidadian Trinidadian. Okay? Caribbean people, but different cultures. And this is what we have to understand. And we know that we don't accept each other when, if somebody say, oh, you're Barbadian, and say, are you Jamaican? You take offense to it because you're saying, oh, I'm Barbadian. And you want to make sure people know that you're Barbadian. Okay? So why are we thinking that an Africa is a continent that, we're all Africans? It doesn't make any sense. But education again, and how to think, and not that we are negating our African roots and heritage, but we must understand the nuances of culture and the nuances of what words mean, semantics. Now, Z saying, Andrew, I am a realist. I think we are too far gone to recover. Yes, but it doesn't mean though, Z, that one or two people cannot be transformed. And that is what this channel is about. We are not going to be pessimists that we think everybody is going to, even if 20, and sometimes sometimes I don't set the right example. And I think that I should have 100 people on the live or, 200. But even if it's just one person on the live, it is still one person who's listening. So we have 14 people on the live right now. So think about 14, 20 people, having an awareness and willing to change. That's something. And those 20 people can go and they can change 20 other people, and it can continue like that. All right. So let's not be pessimistic. There is hope, but we must understand that the majority will never accept responsibility and refuses to change. All right. And that is what is the society. That's why we'll never change, because the majority always refuses to change. They are happy in the system as it is. Let's look at another video, another clip before we move on, because this was a very interesting discussion, very important discussion for us. Let me see if this is what I had on the screen to share. Maybe I shared this already.
Is a scam.
Yeah, I did. So I don't have to put this back up on the screen. I did share it. Yeah. So this is what we have been discussing this afternoon, this evening. Afro-Caribbean identity has a serious issue with identity. Yes, I agree with that type of thinking. It is needed. Yes, because we are the world is interesting, and migration has always happened in the world. And that's why, when we have Sertima from Guyana, who said that blacks were already here before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. So they were already here, right? So, so from a long time, the region has been influenced by African thinking and vice versa, right? People just have always been migrating. The indigenous people that we call like the Arawaks and the Tainos, they came from Asia, as history tells us. So people have always migrated, and their identities change as they migrate. Shouldn't they say that they're still Asian? Yes. Do we think the Asian race, the Asian population, continent, whatever you want to call it, the Japanese, the Chinese, are they the same? They're not, right? So why would we think all Africans are the same? They're not. More so, why would we think that having formed a new Caribbean identity, that we would all be the same? We are not. But there are similar things, and if we come together, that we can achieve. Nothing is wrong with that, because let us say our economies, we are small, so we have to fight bigger economies. So if we unite around some common virtues, yeah, nothing is wrong with that. But to suggest that we are all the same and we're all Africans, and it's idiocy, and that is not true. It is intellectually dishonest. And that's what we're facing right now. And that's why Mr. Mark is going to get away with her nonsense, because people are going to, this black sentimentality that is here now in the Caribbean has dwarfed, I should say deformed, our understanding of Africanity and what African really is. Because Africa is a continent, right? It's not a culture. It's a continent. So you have Nigerian culture, you have, from the Congolese and all of the other countries that are on the continent. And they often don't get along too, and they have their rivalries too. Just like in the Caribbean here, we have our rivalries. Jamaica have their rivalries, their beef with Trinidad, and Trinidad with this person. We all have our beef. But at the end of the day, we have to come around and say, that we had similar experiences in some cases of slavery, of colonialism? Can we come together through our differences and similarities and try to work together? But we can't claim that we're all the same, because that would be, a very dishonest premise. Do you think, Andrew, reparations studies should be included in the Caribbean school curriculum? I think it should. And I think what we need to do also is to find out, if we were to get reparations, how it would be distributed. Would it go to our oligarchs, to the banks, right, to our leaders, and how much of that we would get, if we ever get any, right? Are reparations the same thing as philanthropic donations, like when they sent billions of dollars to Haiti and it was not received by the people? So these are things we have to discuss, and we're just hearing reparations every day, but we're not hearing any specifics about it in terms of how reparations will be distributed and through what channels. They're very mum on that. Or they're telling us reparations, and people get all worked up, because that's what we do in the Caribbean. We react to these news items and to these great things and these pipeline visions of what they're going to accomplish. And at the end of the day, it never happens. We're always disappointed by them because they make it sound very wonderful. And they do sound wonderful. We should get reparations. We should get what we did, because one, we had free labor for many years, for centuries, right? Then after slavery was finished, they actually told us to pay the slave owners, the planters, for ending the system, for our freedom. So we do merit reparations. It's not anything we're begging them. What we're saying is that oftentimes, even though we deserve it, we know the leaders and the oligarchs will take it and they will use it for whatever they will, if we ever even get it here, right? That's another story. All right, so I think that this is was a very good discussion. If there's no other contributions, I think that it was good. Please like it and please share it with others so that we can have other stimulating conversations going on in the region. Any other comment? Thank you so much for joining. All the best to you. Bye-bye.